Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
I'm John Strum, and this is RealTalk MS. It's March 20th, and last week I was in New York for a meeting of the International Progressive MS Alliance's Scientific Steering Committee. We've talked about the Progressive MS Alliance before on the podcast. In fact, Professor Alan Thompson, the chair of the Scientific Steering Committee, joined us back in December on episode 12 of the podcast, and I just have to share with you how inspiring it is every time I come from one of these meetings after experiencing this amazing level of commitment and determination that I see from every member of the committee. Some of the very best neuroscientists in the world are on this committee, and we had committee members fly in from France, Germany, Italy, the UK, and Canada to join colleagues from the United States, along with the CEO of the National MS Society here in the US, the CEO of the Italian MS Society, the CEO of MS Research Australia, the CEO of the MS Society in Denmark, the CEO of the MS Society UK, the CEO of the MS Society of Canada, and the CEO of the Multiple Sclerosis International Federation. And when this high-powered group meets to plan strategy, things get done. And it was gratifying to hear the discussion go beyond pure scientific research to include the importance of patient well-being and the need to make new treatments and therapies available as quickly as possible to people living with progressive MS. Honestly, you can't come away from these meetings without a renewed sense of hope that there's serious work being done and progress being made in better understanding progressive MS, and in using cutting-edge research and emerging technologies to uncover new therapies that can improve the lives of people living with progressive MS. And while we're on the subject of using emerging technology to improve your quality of life, that's exactly what I'll be discussing with my special guest on today's podcast. Experts tell us that 50% of the people living with MS will develop clinical depression, and left untreated, depression can get in the way of literally everything else in your life. For some people, it can make it difficult to even get out of bed. My feeling is that living with MS can be challenging enough all by itself. Trying to manage your MS symptoms while living under the dark cloud of depression can become overwhelming. But to use an overused phrase, now there's an app for that. And this app is based on cutting-edge research and technology. It's a conversational bot that uses artificial intelligence to help people manage their depression right from their smartphone in the comfort and privacy of their own home. And did I mention that right now the app is free? The app is called Wobot, and my guest today is Dr. Athena Robinson, the Chief Clinical Officer at Wobot Labs. Dr. Robinson is going to walk us through the science behind Wobot and help us understand what Wobot does, how Wobot does it, and why you might want to consider adding Wobot to your self-care arsenal. We'll be talking with Dr. Robinson in just a couple of minutes, but first, there are a few other things that you should know about. The MS drug Zinbrida has been voluntarily taken off the market worldwide after 8 cases of serious brain inflammation were reported in Europe. The drug has been available in the European Union, the United States, Switzerland, Canada, and Australia, and according to the European Medicines Agency, over 8,000 people around the world have received Zinbrida. Now, the drug was approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration in May 2016 for treatment of relapsing remitting MS, but even then, The drug was only available through a highly restricted distribution program. The FDA warned from the outset that the drug could cause serious or life-threatening liver damage and serious immune system disorders. Additionally, the FDA said at the time that MS patients had to have already tried at least 2 other MS disease-modifying treatments and couldn't be on any other MS treatment if they were taking Zimbrita. And doctors who wanted to prescribe Zimbrita to their patients had to be registered with this distribution program. Now, doctors who have prescribed Zimbrita have been contacting their patients, checking for symptoms that could indicate brain inflammation. These symptoms include fever, seizures, changes in behavior, confusion, and disorientation. If you've been taking Zimbrita and you haven't heard from your neurologist, you should probably contact them to discuss your best next steps. University at Buffalo researchers have received $1.1 million from the National MS Society to fund 2 important studies. One study is titled The Effects of Working Memory Training on Brain Function, Structure, and Cognition in MS. And it will look at whether 2 neuroscience-based training programs can improve cognition in people living with MS. These 2 training programs will work on both working memory and processing speed because both of these aspects of cognition are impaired in people with MS. The second project is a 3-year study to measure the effectiveness of blocking a particular enzyme to repair the myelin coating that's damaged in multiple sclerosis. And if this study shows promise, it could lead to brand new kinds of therapies for MS. Myomo, a tech startup company that was launched from MIT, has developed a robotic arm brace for people living with limb paralysis from neurological disorders including MS, ALS, and even stroke to help them regain movement in their hands and arms. Wearing the brace, patients use their own muscle signals to control their paralyzed or injured arm. When the patient tries to bend their arm or open or close their hand, sensors in the brace detect what are very weak muscle signals and amplifies those signals, which activate motors in the brace that will then move the patient's hand or arm. The patient fully controls their own hand or arm, and the brace just amplifies the muscle signals the patient is using to get the job done. Now, this robotic arm allows its users to do things that they've lost the ability to do, like feed themselves, do their own laundry, or even carry objects. It's currently available and in use at several rehab facilities in the United States, including the Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic, Massachusetts General Hospital, Kennedy Krieger Institute, the Loma Linda Medical Center, and 20 Veterans Administration hospitals around the country. In some of our past podcast episodes, we've talked about the increasing role that smartphones will play in managing our healthcare, and that's going to be true for everyone's healthcare. But many researchers believe that smartphones might be particularly useful to neurologists as a way to collect a more complete set of data that will give them a better picture of their patient's MS progression and help to determine the best treatment options. If you'd like to see how this might work, you can get started today. The University of Southern California is recruiting for volunteers to test drive MyMS, a smartphone app designed for people living with multiple sclerosis. The app will ask you to complete 6-minute walking tests, cognitive function tests, vision tests, and quality of life surveys. The app will also ask you to upload MRI scans, and after using the app for 3 months, you'll be eligible to receive a free genetic analysis from 23andme.com. All of the information that gets entered into the app will be available to you so you can begin to see symptom trends over time, and your neurologist can fine-tune and personalize your MS treatment and system management options. Participants in the study must be 18 years old or older. They must be diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. They need to have a smartphone, and they have to understand English. There are no clinic visits required for this study, and if you'd like to get started, all you have to do is visit https://mspilot.usc.edu. Smartphones aren't just the future of healthcare. For some people, they're the present. And that brings us to my guest today. As I mentioned at the top of the podcast, depression affects 50% of everyone living with MS, and that's more than 1 million people around the world dealing with depression. And when you fail to treat depression, every other aspect of life seems to get worse. In a moment, we'll be talking with Dr. Athena Robinson, the Chief Clinical Officer at Wobot Labs, and we're talking about a breakthrough app that lives on your smartphone and has been tested and proven to be an effective treatment for depression. We've talked about depression before on the podcast, and I think it's worth talking about it again because, well, research tells us that a full 50% of the people living with multiple sclerosis will be diagnosed with clinical depression. And the thing about living with depression is that it gets in the way of everything. Depression can make every other step forward in managing and living with MS more difficult by a significant order of magnitude. Often it's the very thing that keeps someone from going to their appointment with their neurologist or attending a rehab session or starting a new drug therapy or really participating in any other treatment that could otherwise improve their quality of life. And that's why it's so important to acknowledge depression and take steps to mitigate its power. And I know that health insurance limitations, costs, or even just the logistics of trying to get to a therapy appointment can make dealing with depression even more challenging. That's why I'm happy to see technology step in and give us ways around and through some of these very real obstacles. My guest on the podcast today is Dr. Athena Robinson. Dr. Robinson is the Chief Clinical Officer at Wobot Labs. And Wobot Labs is the home of Wobot. That's WOEBOT. And we're about to learn all about what Wobot is and how Wobot works, and maybe most importantly, why Wobot can be a worthwhile addition to your self-care arsenal. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you very much for having me today.
So tell us, what is Wobot and how does Wobot help people deal with their depression and anxiety?
Wobot is an automated conversational agent. He is currently available through Facebook Messenger. And in addition, we launched our own iOS app earlier this month, and we anticipate launching Android later this month. He is a chatbot that allows people to share about what they might be going through on an average day. He is based in evidence-based psychotherapy, specifically in cognitive behavioral therapy. And cognitive behavioral therapy has a long-standing history of empirical support as a valid treatment approach for depression and anxiety, as well as a host of other mental health concerns as well. So what Wobot does is he checks in with users each day, invites them to share what they're feeling and what the situational circumstances are surrounding that feeling. And then we'll use a wide variety of cognitive behavioral techniques to try to address the concern or the emotion or the thought that the person is sharing about in order to improve mood overall.
I guess one of the things I want to stress, and I should mention full disclosure, I have test-driven Wobot for a while, and Wobot has intelligence programmed in, so it's not the same as playing with one of those old Magic 8 balls where no matter what you type in, you kind of get a very flat, generic sort of response.
You're correct. Wobot is much more than a flat-facing app where you input data and then the app sort of stores it and feeds it back to you in some sort of routine way. It really is a conversational agent. So the purpose here with that is to augment the opportunity to build a relationship between the bot and the user, allowing for trust and disclosure. In addition, the bot also is programmed to do some personalization towards your point. So based upon what the user may come in with, for example, if the user comes in with a very highly intense emotional experience, the bot will deliver something different than if it is sort of an average range emotional experience. Also, we offer mood tracking and graphing that are personalized to the data that the user inputs, which will create opportunities for insight for the user. So I agree with you. I do think it is more personalized than some of the currently available commercialized flat-facing apps.
So you mentioned that the foundation of what Wobot does is based in cognitive behavioral therapy. And I know that when some people think of therapy, they picture lying on the couch talking about how they've always secretly resented their mother. But that's not what cognitive that's not what cognitive behavioral therapy is. So can you talk a little bit about how cognitive behavioral therapy differs from traditional talk therapy and perhaps why it's so effective in dealing with things like depression?
Absolutely. It is a very good point that cognitive behavioral therapy is different than some traditional conceptualizations of traditional talk therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is an active form of therapy where the provider and the user are engaging with one another quite actively. It is focused on what's going on in the current day situation in the present life of the individual. So it looks at thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. The bot will ask for what the person is thinking, what the person is feeling, and then based upon those responses will help identify distortions in the person's thinking. As humans, all of us have cognitive distortions. We all make interpretations about situations. It's just what we do. Now, some of our interpretations can fuel really intense negative emotional responses. And those distortions, because they're inaccurate, are causing those negative emotions superfluously. So what the bot will do is help someone to highlight and identify when there is a cognitive distortion occurring and help them actually rewrite the original interpretation into a new thought, thereby reducing some of the intense negative emotional sequela that would otherwise occur. So that's a little bit about how cognitive behavioral therapy is different than traditional talk therapy. It's active. It's actively asking about thoughts, emotions, feelings. It's collaborative in the sense that both the bot and the user are working together to unearth what the distortion underlying the interpretation is, and then also to rewrite it in order to minimize negative superfluous emotional experiences on behalf of the user.
I read that there's been some research done to measure Wobot's effectiveness, and I'm hoping that maybe you can share a little bit about what that research was about.
Absolutely. Happy to do so. There was a randomized clinical trial conducted last summer of June 2017 at Stanford University. We randomized 70 students aged 18 to 25 to one of two conditions. One condition was chatting with Wobot for 2 weeks, and the other condition, students were provided with a mental health ebook about depression in college students. After 2 weeks, we found statistically significant differences between the two groups. Specifically, there was significantly less depression and anxiety symptoms among those students who were randomized to chat with Wobot as opposed to the ebook. So this data really helps us understand that within a brief period of time, this evidence-based psychotherapeutic can be delivered digitally with outcomes of interest in terms of remitting depression.
Well, that's wonderful and amazing as you describe it. My eyes just widened, but I think that is, I guess, the proof that this is more than just a concept and an idea and a hope that maybe it'll do some good. But like all good science, it's been tested, it's been measured, and we have some results to talk about that give us good reason to have some faith in the job that Wobot's doing.
Absolutely. It's so important, I think, for consumers who are struggling with mental health concerns to have access to evidence-supported treatments. It's one of the things that we as scientists and as clinicians really want to put forth, So many of the mental health facing flat apps that are available to users haven't undergone some of the rigorous randomized clinical trial testing. And so we're really thrilled that Wobot has been able to put some of this data forth, and we continue to test him as we move forward in our development.
I think that makes a lot of sense. It certainly speaks to the validity of the work you're doing. I think it serves another purpose too. I know that I talk with an awful lot of folks who are struggling with MS, who are MS caregivers and feeling a little emotionally overburdened, and maybe more than a little emotionally overburdened. And unfortunately, when you are laboring under the cloud of depression, your initial response to a prospective treatment that might help you is to simply say, well, that sounds great, but it won't work for me. It's not worth my effort because I can't be helped. My situation is just feeling hopeless. And I think that even if you feel that way, the other part of your mind that processes facts has to recognize and acknowledge that this isn't all about feeling that it might work. This is about some statistical evidence that this is certainly something that is worthy of careful consideration and at least a try. And I think that's huge.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. When we talk about the heaviness or the beast that is depression, those of us who have experienced it, or those of us who have a loved one or who care for someone who's experienced it, can see how intensely it removes motivation, sometimes will, hope. It is a powerful thing. And I do agree with you that using something that is much more readily accessible, significantly more accessible than traditional models of psychotherapy, can really help people who are struggling in their own homes, who have transportation difficulties, who have cost barriers that they're facing. So having a chatbot available on your smartphone that's evidence-based, we hope will minimize some of these access barriers for individuals who are managing MS as well as their caregivers. And in addition, one thing that I'm thinking of too is how depression can occur on a gradient. And there are a lot of people for whom they may not have a full-blown clinical syndrome yet. They may just have some signs, some early signs and early symptoms. Wobot is available for individuals like that too, and it really could perhaps help to catch people, if you will, prior to their sinking into something that's much more significant and difficult to manage.
Since you mentioned having access to Wobot, is there a fee for using Wobot?
At this time, there is no fee for using Wobot. We may, as a business, need to revisit that later. We have not set a target date for when exactly we will do so. But at this time, we are really working towards refining our product, enhancing the user experience, making sure we're reaching people in need, analyzing our data, and then later we'll revisit our monetization strategy.
That makes it absolutely a home run. I mean, there's zero barriers to someone going ahead and engaging with Wobot. And then after a period of time, judging for themselves how they'll feel. As I said, having test-driven Wobot, I can even share that Wobot will ask you after a period of time and show you a graph that shows you visually how your mood has changed or not changed or whatever the case may be on a daily basis. And when you see that visual representation, no matter how well you know yourself, it's still an eye-opener.
Yes, we really are trying to capitalize upon those moments of insight for our users. We always ask ourselves, what can we provide back to the user that facilitates a moment of pausing, emotional reflection, and facilitates their ability to make decisions about changing the way they think or changing their mood. So we hope that the graphs are a step towards that.
As you said, as of now, Wobot can be accessed directly. You can download the app for your iPhone today. If you have an Android device, you can access Wobot by using Facebook Messenger's application, and then the Android application itself, the Android app, will be out later this month. Dr. Robinson, I just want to thank you because I think that the work you folks are doing is going to help so many people, both within and far beyond the MS community. And I always get a thrill when I see technology open the door to people who haven't been able to walk through that door so easily before. So thank you, and thanks for being on the podcast today.
And thank you, John, for the opportunity to share a little bit about Woebot to your audience. We appreciate it very much.
Well, that's going to wrap up this week's episode of Real Talk MS. Before I let you go, let me remind you how much I appreciate your comments, your feedback, your suggestions for future topics that you'd like to see us talk about. So if you haven't already, please send me an email. You can reach me at John, that's Jon, at realtalkms.com, or you can visit realtalkms.com on the web and leave a comment there. And while you're out and about on the web, I'd appreciate it if you stopped at iTunes and left a rating and review for the Real Talk MS podcast. My name is John Strum. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.